would you please?
Kind of gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you again for the opportunity you give us to come and worship in our house today, Lord. We just want to lift up to you the many that have been mentioned here today, Lord. You know their every need, you can supply the need, Lord. We just pray that you'll just care for them as you see fit, Lord. We just ask that you'll be with us now as we begin our lesson today, Lord. Be with Allan as he stands before us just to share the thoughts of what we've studied today, Lord. Just watch over and care for us. Be with Brother Sam as he stands before us to share your word today. First in thy name we do pray. Amen.
We talked about the sign of his grace, sign of his authority. We're going to talk about the sign of his provision today. And so we'll get started in that. How many Bibles we got this morning? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Lesson? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many have I got in here? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A lot of the kids are still down there at that Ridgecrest, I think, ain't they? So I'm still down there. How many did I count? What? I don't count Cindy. She don't want me to count her. She said she's not here. No, you get counted. You count another one, don't you, Cindy? Because she always told me not to count her.
Yeah, Stacy counts me.
Yeah. I have no idea what that is. Cindy's clicking us. Many people relegate Jesus to solely the spiritual realm. I think he's just in the spiritual realm, as though the spiritual life is separate from all other areas of life. Jesus saves the whole person. This lesson's going to talk about that some today. He seeks to help us and sustain us in every area of life, and we can trust him to do so. As Jesus meets our every need, we can be a conduit of his care in the lives of others. It says here, talking about if we keep our eyes open to see Jesus working in our world, we may see signs of his provision in the most unlikely of places and in the most unlikely of ways. So we're going to talk about that some this morning in John 6, 1 through 5. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles which he did on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes, he saw a great company come unto him. He saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread, or where shall we buy bread, that these may eat? Jesus saw the need of the people. Now, it goes in the lesson, talks about this Sea of Galilee and Tiberias. He said the sea, also known as the Sea of Tiberias, a Roman name honoring the second emperor. Talks about why it was named that. The sea is located near the city of Capernaum, the center of Jesus' ministry for a time. Capernaum was the hometown of Simon Peter and Andrew. Luke called the body of water the lake of Gennesaret. The Sea of Galilee is approximately 13 miles from north to south and 8 miles wide. That's a pretty good sized body of water, isn't it? Pretty good size. And that's why it's important. Now, the Jordan River flows into it out of the Dead Sea. Fishing industry flourished in the Sea of Galilee. Peter, Andrew, and James and John are identified as fishermen in the area. And we know the story of James and John, all of them, how Jesus called them. Now, John understood the mighty acts of Jesus to be signs pointing to a greater reality. Jesus followed the healing. Jesus followed the healing at Bethsaida. I can't talk this morning, with other healings in the area. John didn't specifically record the greater reality revealed by these physical acts of healing, other than they, no doubt, displayed the power of God and at work in the ministry. Now, Jesus done these things, and Jesus Messiah. Jesus done these miracles. We talked last week about the healing and about the blind man being questioned. And so these healings and these things he's talking about is starting to, when I was reading this and reading the other lessons, it's starting to grow towards the end, towards his crucifixion. And that's what this is all leading to. It says he went up to the mountain. He said when he got to the Sea of Galilee, nestles between two mountain ranges. It's unclear which mountain it was that they talked about. Perhaps John wished to communicate that Jesus sought solace from the press of the crowds who followed him because of the healings. Matthew seems to suggest the same idea when Jesus went to the mountain to teach his disciples in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. But this private time was interrupted. As Jesus taught, the crowds discovered where he was and began to filter in and listen. Even the Son of God needed rest and release at times from the demands of ministry. Though it was hard to get away from the crowds, he didn't really have any place to go, did he? I mean, this little area right here. And how many people do you think gathered around there? How many people do you think gathered?
It says 5,000 men, right? So it's been women and children too.
Beside women and children, yeah.
So it could have been 10,000.
Could have been a whole bunch. It's a bunch of them, wasn't it? The miraculous thing about this whole story is and I know you know this, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. That's what we're here for. What would you have thought had you been down here at Watauga Point? Some preacher down there, or some minister, some person. There's about, that place probably hold a couple thousand people. And been down there all day, listening to this man. Everybody's starved to death. They're hungry. Well, we've got to get something to eat. And somebody comes out, well, I've got a piece of bread and a piece of fish, and starts handing it out, handing it out, handing it out. What would you think? It'd be a miracle, wouldn't it? Did you think that everybody, I said all that to say this, do you think everybody in that crowd believed on Jesus? I mean, that's just a hypothetical question. It's not. You know. What do you think, Sam?
I'm sure not all of them did.
I don't believe it did either.
That's why he performed miracles, what people would believe.
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, even then, some didn't believe. And I thought about that as I was reading this. I'm just wondering if all those people, and I know the children probably, you know, you don't count them, and maybe the women did. Probably the women did more than the men, but they just couldn't speak. But nonetheless, I thought about that. So many people. We think 5,000 people. That's a bunch of people. A bunch of people. They didn't have speaker systems, did they?
I was wondering how everybody heard him.
I mean, what?
How did they hear him, that many people? It had to take a big area.
Yeah, that mountain was a big mountain. But I thought about something else. Now, I read something somewhere. Sam, you might correct me, Wally. Where he was speaking, they didn't have sound systems. But it was like an amphitheater. I heard somebody talk about it. I think it was David Jeremiah was talking about that one time, that these people had been over there and said that where he spoke, it kind of echoed. It was like an amphitheater, so everybody heard. What do you think, Walt? Have you ever read anything about that?
No, but this is a, you know, I thought that, I mean, all of us kind of, you know, it comes to us, and how could all these people have heard him at once? I this is supernatural power.
Yes.
It has to be.
Why do you think it mentioned going to a certain place?
Well, Jesus was confined to the country of Israel, and this is where he came from. He came from Nazareth, Galilee.
But he went into the mountain to just get a little break. But
Well, it's right there beside you, you know.
yeah.
It's not that big. This is a small country.
And again, these questions are not really that significant, but I think about these things.
The
If I,
questions are significant.
well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, this all involves the supernatural power of God
Yeah,
through Jesus,
we know that.
the man and God in two. Two in one.
2 and 1.
Right, so we have the supernatural power. Now what, why did Jesus do this? This is a question you just got to ask.
Yeah, but and that's why I was saying, I was listening to somebody, and I think it was David Jeremiah talking about it, said that where he went on that Mount of Olives, his voice, and again, it's supernatural, like you said, but his voice carried to all the people. And David Jeremiah done a study on that one time. That's why I brought that up. It involves this lesson because he went to Mount Olives, 5 to 8, 10,000 people. I mean, you couldn't get that many people in this whole area right here. I mean, that'd be a big area, wouldn't it? Go ahead, you was going to say something.
Well, I think it was both. You know, we've been in places where we could hear people talking on the other ridge.
Yeah.
You know, just like we were sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
The way the sound carried. And then like Wally said, it was supernatural also. You know, on the day of Pentecost, there's over 3,000.
Yeah.
And the Bible says they heard the wonderful works of God in their own language.
Right, right.
So, it takes both. I think God uses the natural, and then he also works through
Uses the unnatural.
his power, to do that which only he can do. And the same way in our life today, these things happen. We know how God had to be.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I was reading this, and
I think that's a good point, though.
well, as I study it, as I was reading, and I go through these things, and I think about these things, and sometimes I forget them, but I thought about this, and when he was talking to them there, that everybody heard him, all them people. Let me get back on the lesson. Now, he talked about, he said, the Sea of Galilee is nestled between these two mountains, and it talked about this. Perhaps John wished to communicate that Jesus sought solace from the press of the crowds who followed him because of his healing. Now, Matthew seems to suggest the same idea when Jesus went to the mountain to teach his disciples in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. We read that a second ago. So he went there to teach them. But all these people filtered in there and said even the Son of God needed this rest. Now, it says the Passover commemorates the deliverance of the Hebrew slaves from the terrors of the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn in Egypt. John seems to have referred to three Passover events and following roughly corresponding to these 3 years of Jesus' earthly ministry. John didn't record any reason for mentioning this approaching feast other than for chronology, but he may have wished to highlight the significance of the season and the eagerness of the people to seek and to worship God. That's where Wally talked about that God intervened, that God intervention. This may indicate why the crowds were so intent on finding Jesus. With the approaching holy season, they were more eager than usual to see his miracles and to hear his teachings. Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, another coastal town bordering the Sea of Galilee. Jesus invited Philip to follow him. Philip did and found his friend Nathanael and told him to come and to see the prophet Moses foretold. Though Judas is identified later as keeping the apostles' money, Philip might have held that role at some point. If so, it would have been natural for Jesus to approach the treasure when the money was needed to buy bread. And we're going back in just a little bit what the story started talking about. Now, this word in Scripture, bread, in Scripture often includes foodstuffs other than bread. Though bread seemed to be the basic meal item for most people, in this case, bread also included fish and the young boy had brought. The term here underscores the meagerness of what was available at that moment. Now, it emphasized this meagerness. It emphasized this little bit and how far it went. How many baskets did they pick up after that, Bart? Do you know? After they all eat. A bunch, wasn't they? I think it was 13 baskets or something like 12 or 13 baskets. Yeah. It's in here somewhere, but 12 baskets. That's quite a bit. What did you say, JR? What did you say, Danny? Yeah.
There's a basket for everybody here.
Quite a bit, though, wasn't it, Danny? Yeah. It says in Matthew, the disciples asked Jesus to send the people away so they could find food for themselves. Their logic was that the area was deserted and the hour was late. Luke recorded the disciples' wish to send the crowd away. Mark had already added to a unique caveat. Jesus was moved with compassion toward them because they were as sheep not having a shepherd. The practical concern of the disciples is contrasted with the compassion of Jesus for the needs of the people. He saw their need. He knew they was hungry, and he responded. John 6:11. Who wants to read that? Anybody? Go ahead.
And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennies worth of bread is not sufficient for them, and every one of them may take a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, there is a lad here which has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many? And Jesus said, make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in numbers about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he gave thanks, he distributed it to the disciples. And the disciples to them that went sat down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would.
Now, Jesus met the need of the people in a miraculous way. Now, from Philip's perspective, the ability to feed the masses didn't make sense in time of money or money. From Andrew's perspective, the ability to feed was due to a lack of resources. Yet, once Jesus saw this boy turn over his food to the disciples, he was going to demonstrate how little is much when God is in it. Now, Jesus knew already what he would do, but wanted to prove Philip. This is not to be understood in the sense of temptation as Satan would do, but a testing intended to lead Philip to further and deeper commitment as a follower of Jesus. Philip would grow in his understanding and the power of God, the power of God is demonstrated in the miracles of Jesus. Now, 200 pennyworth, literally 200 denarii, a denarius or a penny, was a typical day's wage. They was overpaid, wasn't they? Penny a day. What would a penny buy back then? Apparently quite a bit, didn't it?
It was a day's provision.
A day's provision.
A day's worth.
1 penny.
A day's worth of
Food. 1 penny. Philip's objection was that it would take more than 6 months of labor to earn enough to feed the multitude. The disciples may have had some money, but hardly this amount, and there were no sources of food nearby, even if they had sufficient funds. There wasn't no restaurant around nowhere, or Dollar General. They didn't have none back then. Now, Andrew, often identified as the soul-winning disciple, since he brought people to Christ at least 3 times, he was a disciple of John the Baptist and began to follow Jesus, introducing his brother Simon Peter to Jesus. Here he brought the lad and his lunch to Christ. And later he brought some inquiring Greeks to meet Jesus. Tradition claims Andrew was crucified on a cross in the form of an X, now known as a St. Andrew's cross, and that he may have been tied to the cross rather than nailed at his request, believing he was unworthy to die in the same way that Christ did. Andrew may have been seeking to discover what food was available. He surely met with disappointment, for there was only a small portion of food. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all wrote about the meager food supply, but don't mention the boy. Only John identified who had the food, is often implied that he had that the lad brought his lunch to Jesus. But John records that Andrew was the one to offer to Jesus, but seemingly did so like shrugging his shoulders, or like, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this little bit? But amongst all these many people. Now, these barley bread, this barley they talked about was probably the cheapest they could get. It says barley was commonly grown in Palestine and identified in the Old Testament as a food for the poor. It was also used to feed livestock. Some believe the fish mentioned here was pickled fish, more like a relish or topping. The point is the utter hopelessness of feeding anyone more than this young boy with such a meager lunch. Now, it's the emphasis on this meager amount of food for a reason. What's that reason? Why do you think it's emphasized? This emphasis is put on this meager amount. Somebody.
Demonstrates how much it was amplified by his power.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. It shows the miraculous power of God, number one, and it shows that what God can do. What we said a minute ago. Little is much, isn't it? With the Lord. Little is much. That's what he's talking about. Now, Jesus asked the disciples to arrange the people in an orderly fashion for serving and perhaps for numbering. Mark and Luke mention specifically companies of 50 and 100 for Mark. John just gave a total account of men. Matthew mentioned men beside women and children. Thus, the awesome display of God's provision is multiplied when realizing the crowd was larger than initially thought. It's been speculated that the actual crowd may have been in excess of 10,000. That's what he said a while ago. 10,000. A lot of people.
Could have been 20, 25 even.
Could have been, but in excess of 10,000, yeah.
People had a lot of kids back.
That's exactly right. What's the term breaking bread? We use that term today. What does that mean? There you go. Sit down and have a meal. Let's go break bread, Bart. That don't mean bring out an old stale piece of cornbread. Bring out some good bread. Go ahead.
And of course, Jesus broke bread at the Last Supper.
Right.
Pointing to his body.
Yep.
Given for us.
Yep, that's exactly right. But hence the term. It says the other three Gospels mention Jesus breaking the bread after giving thanks. This may either mean that the bread on the mountain had that day was baked in loaves that needed breaking before sharing, or that the breaking was part of a common ritual after giving thanks. Luke recorded. Sammy just said it. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread, gave thanks to God in presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. It's not uncommon yet today that we invite others to break bread with us. That is to share a meal. That's what that means. And you all got that right. John 6:12 through 15. Somebody want to read that one? If you do, start reading.
When they were filled, he said unto the disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into a mountain himself alone.
Now, the satisfaction Jesus brought to the people led them to expect more from him. You've done this for me, I want you to do a little more, little more, little more. So that's what, gather up the fragments, it says. All the Gospels record the disciples collecting the remaining food, 12 baskets. I don't know why I said 13, but I said it's 12. No doubt underscoring the awesome power of God on display in caring for the multitude and providing for them in an abundance. The people received more than they needed. Jesus commanded the disciples to gather the remaining fragments, though the gospel writers did not tell us the specific reason for gathering what was left. Would the food be used by the disciples over the next few days? 12 baskets might be taken by the 12 apostles on their journey the next day. Does not really say why or what the reason for that was. We can kind of speculate. Or was the remaining food to be given to others who came to hear Jesus and who might have hungry family members at home? It's not uncommon today. Congregations have fellowship meals for church members to think of others who might enjoy some of the food that remains. The gift of food is usually a welcomed gift and a way to express love for others. We still do it today. When we have a dinner at church or school, there's always food left over. And people take it home, take it to others. We want them to. We'd rather give it to somebody than throw it away. Scripture is clear regarding Jesus' instruction to retrieve what remained. We must exercise care and not wantonly waste or abuse what God has given. It is true that we should honor God for all he's given and strive to see that nothing be lost. I mean, people used to say, well, when I sat down to the meal at home, Mom made me eat every bite, whatever it was. Even old, what's them little cabbage heads called? Yeah, I wouldn't eat them things with nothing. Yeah, what are you laughing at? You like them?
I like them.
Well, I'm glad for you. I can't stand them. And asparagus.
Oh, it's even better.
That's like eating a corn stick. What do you think? What do you think of our Butch? But you understand what I'm saying? I've said that, and I know we can have a little levity, but that's what this is talking about. Nothing was wasted. When Grandma sat down food to eat, you eat it. Whatever it was, you eat it. She didn't make Brussels sprouts, though. But I said that just because that's what this is talking about. When they sat down, they didn't waste anything. You know, this talks about the prophet that should come into the world. It says, some Bible scholars believe this reference to that prophet points back to the promise of Deuteronomy 18:15. The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Unto him ye shall hearken. This was Philip's explanation to Nathanael. Moses is remembered as the instrument God used to send bread or manna to the wandering Hebrews in their long journey to the promised land. The next verse in John 6 shows that the people wanted to make Jesus their king immediately after this miracle. Why did Jesus not do that?
Because he knew he was going to be sacrificed.
Okay,
It wasn't part of his plan.
but it's a little more. What do you think? Why did he not want to be their king?
He also already was.
Yeah, I know. But there you go. You was right. Wasn't his time. He says right here. It says this immediately after this, prompting his departure from them. He left them because the time for such a position had not yet come. Wasn't his time. You know, he had a plan. We didn't know. They didn't know his plan. He had a plan. He knew exactly. They didn't understand it. No. We probably wouldn't have understood it.
Well, we got hindsight. We can look at the history.
Yeah, but I'm talking about if we was there.
Yeah, if we were there.
But we know, yeah, because we can read and we understand. And we've talked about this timing before. Remember, he said there's a time for everything. Time to live, time to die, time to plant, time to harvest, all these times. And so it was not his time for such position had not yet come. So that's what I wanted to get that out, because it was talking about that. Subsequent verses show the disciples spent the night crossing the Sea of Galilee in a boat. Jesus encountered the multitudes the following day and chided them for their willingness to follow, because he fed them. In other words, chide them and tell them, no, you need to go home. Some in the crowd accentuated the promise of Moses when they spoke about Moses providing manna in the same way Jesus provided bread. Jesus exhorted the multitude that their spiritual ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, but they died. Physical bread can't ensure life for more than a short time. In the midst of his dialogue with the crowd, Jesus spoke another of the great I am statements recorded in John's Gospel. What did he say? What are we talking about? Talking about bread, aren't we? What did Jesus say? There you go. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And Jesus' teaching that day reminded all that life is more than the physical and temporal. Those who believe and trust in him will have eternal life. To one who eats this spiritual bread shall live forever, forevermore. What is this when we do our communion? What does that represent, Sammy?
Jesus' body.
Bread of life. The bread of life. Perhaps the approaching Passover fanned the fervor of the people for the Messiah to appear. Orthodox Jews yet today leave a door open when they celebrate the Passover in the event Elijah appears to announce the Messiah. Well, I won't get into that. The multitudes no doubt believed Jesus' miracles proved he came from God and were eager to join his army. In the final Passover, Jesus spent in Jerusalem. During that we now call Holy Week or Passion Week, he was welcomed by crowds as Messiah with great adulation on Sunday. But then the crowds, now listen to this, but then the crowds, perhaps including some of the same people, shouted, what? Crucify him. Crucify him. Remember what I said a little while ago? Did all the people there believe? Did all the people there accept? What did this just tell us? Crucify him. Go ahead.
They were contending with the Mosaic law,
Right.
so they couldn't abandon the Mosaic law.
Right.
This involved the Sanhedrin, the
Pharisees, Sadducees. That's what they called me the other day. Johnny and them called me a Sadducee, Charlie. I'm sending them to Atlanta today, so I'll get rid of them.
I will do that to him.
But I said that because and I knew this was going to bring this back up. But perhaps it says that on Sunday he's the Messiah, great adulation on Sunday. But then here they are now shouting, crucify him on Friday. Now, in the end, Jesus had not fulfilled the common expectation of a military Messiah. Independence from Rome might have been a worthy political goal, but Jesus had not come for political purposes. He didn't come here to be a politician. He didn't come here but to do one thing, and he did it. And I suppose it's hard to really understand sometimes, because when you grow up in, like Bart and everybody's been in, Richard, all these many years, and we've been taught this all of our life, it would be hard. You kind of paid a little bit of attention. It would be hard right now if we had to go with some other belief. What do you think, Richard? It'd be hard to do, wouldn't it? So when we talk about the Mosaic law, that's how they lived, didn't they? That's how they lived. That's what they lived by. That's what they were taught from that size to a grown man or woman. It was hard for them to understand that. I think, what do you think, Sam? It's still hard today for them to believe. But Jesus told us that, didn't he? He told that. If we read the Bible, read about what Jesus done. He told that, didn't he? So that's what he's talking about here. It's hard for these people. And it's talking about, crucify him, crucify him. What is peer pressure? Does anybody know what peer pressure is?
Going along to get along.
There you go. Peer pressure, I've seen it in action. When we go on a call sometimes, I get called out on traffic, and there'd be a bunch of people around, and somebody's starting out. I said, now just calm down. Oh, no, settle down. Peer pressure. They're putting pressure on him. Then he started, well, maybe he's right. So they all get together, and then you have this uproar. Then you have a problem. And I think this peer pressure we talk about, this Mosaic law, was their peer pressure too, that they all went along with this. It was hard for them to accept Christ, some of them. But when they saw, a lot believed. A lot believed. Now, he came at this moment to fulfill Isaiah's prophecy of the suffering servant. The kind of king the Jews wanted wasn't Jesus' mission. He came, as John the Baptist announced, to be the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. John 1:29. And that was his purpose. That was his goal. Let's get a little hypothetical again. We got a minute. Sam, you might kick in on this too, and Wally. What do you think would have happened? What do you think it would have been? Now, I'm going way back. Had Christ come as a conquering king, would things have been different, you think? Good question.
That wasn't a plan.
That wasn't a plan, but I'm saying it's hypothetical. Couldn't have happened. Had it happened.
Had it happened, the world would have been different.
Probably.
Because the Jews would have been the rulers.
Yeah.
The Jewish nation
Yeah.
would have been
The rulers.
the rule. Well, it couldn't have happened because
Nope.
it just couldn't have happened. That wouldn't have.
Wasn't God's plan.
Rome was there.
Yeah. But like I said, I got way off base there, but I just thought about that. What would you think? That would have been
Well, that's a common question.
yeah, but it would have been a mess, wouldn't it?
Well, and that's what he's going to do with it.
That's what's
It's going to happen, yeah.
Yeah. But he had to pay the redemption price for mankind.
For me.
He becomes his king.
I know we got a lot on this, and it's good. I thought it was a real good lesson. It really reaches out there, but it's a good lesson, and it teaches. And when he talks about these different ones, different people like Philip and talk about teaching, that's what teaching is about. Is instructing, showing, and go ahead, Wally.
Read John chapter 10. Now, that is after this
Mm-hmm.
series of lessons. In chapter 10, Jesus has been challenged by the Pharisees,
Mm-hmm.
which is a constant thing now, that he was not the Son of God, that he was blasphemous, and that Jesus was, his reply was, if you had read the scripture, you've had the scripture, you've had prophets, and you still don't believe, you're not of Abraham, your father is the devil.
Yeah.
So there you go. He was contending with these people who were emboldened by Satan himself, and that's what he's saying. So
Yeah.
that is a continuous thing, and they did not believe, and they still don't, as a rule, they still haven't accepted him as the man.
Well, they haven't, as of today, a lot of them haven't. I mean,
But they are gradually.
yeah. Well, they had a movement there. They talked about it. A lot of them had accepted Christ.
It's happening.
It's happening. I've talked about this before. I watched it before. these couple of guys went down into Jerusalem, down to Israel, and they were asking questions of just common everyday people, and they asked him about the Messiah, about Jesus, and everyone he interviewed, oh, Jesus was a great prophet, great man. Well, do you think he was the Messiah? Oh, no, the Messiah hasn't come yet. So, and it's hard. That Mosaic law is kind of hard to break even today, I think. They hanging on to some of that. But anyway, we run out of time. I hope that we got that out. Everybody understands it a little bit. Pray for one another. Remember these names we lifted up at the beginning of the lesson. Pray for one another, and keep praying. JR, we ain't heard nothing from you this morning. How about dismissing us?